All right, everyone. Welcome to this new episode of the Single Source, the product data podcast by PIMvendors.com. I'm Stefan Spijkers. I'm one of the co-founders of PIMvendors.com. And today I have with me in the studio Chris Jobse, my co-founder, and Helen Grimster, the director of product marketing from Syndigo. They'll do a quick introduction themselves, but before we go to that, we are recording a live session. But if you have any questions, just let me know and we'll weave those into the conversation. And the recording will obviously be made available as part of our podcast. So if you're not a subscriber yet, I would invite you to subscribe. You don't miss any new episodes with Helen or with any of our other guests. You can do that on the favorite platform of your choice, be that YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, I think anywhere you get your podcasts. And of course, as they always say, leave a review or give us a rating. That really helps in discoverability and people finding our podcast. Now, today we have the digital product passport on the agenda. And I think if you have been active in the product data space, you've probably seen the regulatory, perfect storm coming with all the different regulations hitting at the same time, roughly at the same time, with the PPWR, the packaging regulation happening, the digital product passport and other ESPR related regulatory compliance hitting, depending on which industry you're in, around this time as well. And even if it's not hitting you right now, you should be working on it because, product lifecycle management usually means you have to plan these things a few years maybe in advance. So it's better to be ready. And today we're going to discuss what the digital product passport means for you. But before we get into that, maybe do a quick round of introductions. First, Chris, could you really quickly introduce yourselves and then Helen?
Yeah, fine. I'm working already more than 25 years in the digital space as e-commerce, so I've seen quite a lot of things coming by in regulations, but also the development of what kind of data is needed for the customer, the end customer. And therefore it's interesting to see also the digital product passport. What does it bring, not just based on the regulations, but also maybe for the end customer. So that's where I'm looking into.
Hi, I'm Helen Grimster. I work at Syndigo currently as product marketing. Prior to that, I worked at Gartner covering PIM and MDM. I've been very interested in the digital product passport since not its inception, but when it first raised its little head. I think I was one of the first analysts to start writing about it before anybody else was interested, including Gartner, if I'm honest. So I think it's been around for quite a long time. It's been a bit niche, maybe a bit theoretical. So I think maybe finally, after a few years, we're finally seeing it actually come into fruition. Or are we? I think that's what we're going to discuss today, really.
Yeah, that's one of the topics that we have for today. Maybe before we delve into the if it's ever going to happen or what it is going to mean, maybe discuss first what it actually is and what the different layers or components are of the digital product passport. Maybe Chris, if you could quickly sketch out the main elements in the digital product passport.
Basically, it stems from the Eco Design for Sustainable Product Regulation, meaning actually what they're looking for is product needs to fit into the ecosystem. You need to be able to refurbish things and all kind of things. The environment should be guarded, and that's the basic idea from the European Union. So it's a European regulation, but the moment you import products into Europe, you need to have the data in place. And what this data is, we maybe come to this later, but there are all kind of information which most companies already have on these products need to be brought together and needs to be available also for future use. So when you have like a machine which has a digital product passport, this machine will maybe live for 15 years or 20 years. So this needs to be available also till the end of the life cycle of the product. So when you want to refurbish things or you want to repair things, you need to have this information. And where this is, we will tell you.
Yeah. And maybe if we look at the sort of structural components of the digital product passport, so okay, we understand where it comes from and what the goals are. So what does that, I mean, the episode is called What Does It Mean? What does it mean? What do we need to have in place for the DPP to work?
What we need to have in place is, in the first place, an identification of the product. You need to identify this product, and there are different levels of identification. You can have a group level, you can have a batch level, you can have an individual level. You need to apply to these rules set by the European Union. You need to have information about materials from your product. The environmental information, the carbon footprint is part of it. Singularity, so durable ratings, repairability score, extra spare parts maybe, and the end of life information. How can a product be recycled? Is there any hazardous material in a product? There information about the supply chain, so the traceability of your product data. When a shirt is made, where is it made? But what material? Where does material come from? Where is the company which wove the information, or painted the information, or assembled the product? All this information needs to be in this digital product passport.
Right. But then, okay, the digital product passport, what is it? Like, what is it physically? Maybe Helen, could you sort of sketch out what that is?
That's probably the biggest bit of confusion, really, actually what it is. And I think for me, it's like a digital identity. And I think that's what Chris said as well, of the product that you're buying or is in within the product that you've bought. And I think it's not just a document, it's not a PDF. It's that you stick somewhere. It's actually a URL. It's almost like a digital twin that you create on that when you make that product. So you will have different product passports for different versions or iterations of that product. And I think that's the bit that makes it quite complex. And what you're really generating is that QR code or that URL that gives you those key pieces of information. I think at the moment for the one that's been published, it's about 167 attributes that you need to store, but not all of them are exposed to everybody. Some are for us as a consumer, some are for anybody that's recycling or repairing. But it's something that's readable as a QR code, and of course. And it's both readable for us as consumers by scanning that, but of course the other thing is, of course, it's machine readable as well. So then we're moving in, of course, into AI. And I think the thing is that it's generated, and then you have to, and we'll get into this a bit more, you have to register that URL, and it has to, as Chris says, live on for the actual lifetime of that product. So it's something that you have to manage, make sure that you've got the correct information for, and then generate that, and then make sure that you store it somewhere that it can be read. But I think the real issue around it is, where does all of that data come from, and who will own that? And I think that's one of the biggest bits that people aren't fully understanding is, how much information do I already have on that I can put into this framework? Because it is a framework that has been, I'm going to say, predefined. We're still working through some of it, I believe, depending on what product you're selling. But it's really thinking about those different pieces of information about the product that you are buying. And and as we've already said, it's different depending on what type of product that is. So the information for a battery is going to be different to the information to a mattress, to a tire, and so on. But it's something that you generate when you produce that product, and then you have to store that digital twin or that product passport so that anybody can actually interact with that. I'm not quite sure if that was what you were looking for me to answer, but that's a take on it.
Storing this information means outside of your organization, outside of your company, because maybe next year you're going bankrupt, but the product still lives on. So people need to be able to reach the information. So it needs to be outside of your own company. So it's
That's
also
a really important point, and it has to be agnostic. And wherever that's stored is going to need to be approved, because there will be eventually, if we get to that point, there will be predefined providers of who is going to actually host that URL or that digital product passport, which means you are going to need to register it as well, which is another step in the whole process. So I think just one little point that we perhaps didn't point out was there's a difference between a digital product passport and the digital product passport, because a digital product passport, some are already out there. You've already seen QR codes that you can interact with. Some retailers are already using them. But this is a defined framework from the EU of the information that they want to store. So we are actually already seeing in the big wide world QR codes to give you some of this information, but they may not be fully meeting what will be the digital product passport requirements. So if you're one of those retailers that's already doing that, fair play. Well, good for you. There's not many of you out there right now. So I think it's something to really think about. But there is a slight difference between the and a digital product passport. I just wanted to point that out. And so we're really talking about the digital product passport today.
Yeah. So it is a digital twin. There's different attributes that you need to store based on the different product categories that you have the digital product passport for. There's a physical representation layer in the RFID or the QR code that makes available the URL where the digital product passport lives. And that digital product passport needs to live not in your PIM or in your MDM, because it needs to be available for the coming generation or the end of life.
Yeah.
And that needs to be stored outside of your organization, because we can't trust that the organization that brings the product to market is around after 30 years or whatever the actual timeline is, when the product might need to be repaired or recycled or whatever. All right. Maybe we have some questions already from the audience that I wanted to weave in right here. So there's a question that is, do we need always a digital product passport, or is it enough to have a QR code on the product which simply contains links to a PDF document with details of the product information available to the public? I think partially of that has been answered, but I would like to see how you guys think about this. So is that enough to just have the QR code with a link?
No. Unfortunately not, because the QR code right now it probably doesn't cover all of those attributes that are required to create the digital product passport. It may have some of them, and they may be consumer facing, and it may be that you've got really important information like product of country of origin, that kind of thing. But we know that it's going to go much more detailed around how do you recycle that product, what can you do within that. And I think right now just a PDF is not going to give you that, because it's not third party, it's not been authenticated and so on. It's a great first step. I'm not going to lie that you're really thinking about where you need to be, but it's not going to meet the actual requirements just yet. And I don't know if you want to add some more to that, Chris.
And also, I think a PDF is just one snapshot of this product. Whereas when you are a recycling company, you may have an application where you see different information than when you as a customer are scanning this QR code. So the QR code is very valuable. It's a link towards certain parts of the information. And maybe all information, but depending on what role you have in the cycle, you see different parts of the information.
Do we believe that customers will actually scan a QR code or an RFID chip? I mean, did any of you ever scan a QR code that was in a product label? Well,
I did. I am one of those people, probably because I'm quite excited about it.
Yeah.
But I think we're seeing a different generation. Maybe the younger generation are far more interested, or claim to be far more interested, in the sustainability journey of the products that they are buying. And I think obviously with them far more used to scanning QR codes, maybe because they're used to doing looking for information, or they're used to that's how they get information. So I think people will it will take time and education. I think that's the difference. But I think it's going to be a slightly different, longer process. And we know that people scan QR codes to do feedbacks or surveys or to get, there's been a lot around from maybe a marketing perspective of giving you more information or entering competitions or giving you that kind of thing. So I think it's just a change in how people interact and get information. So I think it's still quite nuanced, but I do feel that people will if they want to. And I just think it will be educational as to people whether they want to do that or not. And as I said, some vendors, some retailers have already got that information on their labels. And I believe France already, it's mandatory for textiles to have a QR code. Maybe not the same as the digital product passport, but it's the beginnings of that. So I don't know if you feel the same, Chris, but I think it's
they're changing from a barcode to a QR code.
Yeah.
And of course, this is not the same as digital product passport, but it's a step towards this direction. Also, people look at the QR code just also for price comparison and comparison of products. So they're used more and more to use this kind of tools and every phone has a QR scanner, and it brings you directly to a URL, and this can be the URL of the digital product passport, but it also can be the URL nowadays of the retailer which sells a product. So there's a lot of things going on in this matter.
You make a really good point about the barcodes. The traditional barcodes are going to be replaced. GS1, we are going to 2D barcodes. So we are already on that journey of people will no longer have the barcodes that we know, and we will be moving more towards QR codes. So I think that means that it's going to change everyone's perception of that, gathering that information anyway. So yes, I mean, it's obviously going to take a long time for the existing barcodes to be swapped over, but we're already on that trajectory for people knowing that that's the way that they get information.
Maybe as it ties into a question from the audience, like, is that a unique QR or 2D barcode or RFID or URL per product? Or would it be on a batch level? Or how do you see this? I'm not sure where the regulatory bit ends and where the, I would say, more opportunistic, more forward thinking starts. So as we discussed, right, there's different attributes per category. You need it's a QR code that links to an asset that lives somewhere in a repository. And Chris already mentioned, yes, you can also take another approach instead of just listing the data there that you need to have available because of compliance or regulatory environment reasons. There are some minimum requirements, but you could add links to different marketplaces or shops where you can buy repair kits or spare parts or the follow-up product or the same product. And so there's actual opportunity in the product data passport, so the digital product passport, next to just it is a must-have requirement from a regulatory perspective. But back to the question, is this QR code unique per product? And can you follow the unique product lifecycle on that? Or is it on a different level?
It's an interesting question because you don't go to the unique product when you talk about a shirt, but you can go to the detailed product when you talk about a car, for instance, because it's much more value. When you go, there are 3 levels. The first level is the model level from the digital product passport. That's a more generic level. The next level is the batch level, and the word itself says it's about batches. It's about this batch is the products are coming from Vietnam and not from China, for instance. It may be the same product, but it's another batch. It can also be in the industry, for instance, that a certain batch materials has swapped. So then you talk about a different carbon footprint, for instance. And then the third level, it's the item level. Then you go really to the item, and of course you can do this with every product, but it takes a lot of administration, a lot of effort. So you have to find a balance, what is really needed for a certain product. So yeah, it's possible to go to the item level, but it's mostly done for, actually it's not really in place yet, but it's a more theoretical part. But when you have high value products where things, components change over time, you can go to this item level if you want.
But on the whole, it's going to be batch level. I think that's what I mean, because as Chris said, you could change the between, particularly in clothing, or that things will change. Maybe the manufacturer, as you said, the manufacturer, or the composition of the item, and so on. So that's very much at that level, which means it's going to be that's the digital product passport, or the URL that's fixed against that batch level. And I think that's sort of come maybe more from medical and so on, that people know that formulations change. And again, that depending on where you are in the world, you may, for example, toothpaste, it could be a different formulation depending on where it's manufactured within the world. It still could be a particular brand of toothpaste, but if you buy it in the UK compared to if you buy it in South America, or if you buy it in Australia, the formulation may be slightly different based on regulatory things. So you then would need to do it by batch, because you need to know the differences. So it's nuanced like that. So it's important to be thinking about what type of product you're selling, because, for example, as you said, Chris, for a very high value item, or a configured product as well, of course, and that's where it becomes quite complicated, because you might have more than one digital product passport.
It's interesting. Where does this information then lives in your organization? It's not just the PIM. It's also ERP, because batch information is mostly covered in your ERP. So it's a combination of this kind of information which forms the digital product passport. That makes it more complicated.
It's more than just ERP, though, isn't it? Let's think about it. It's also, you've got the sustainability information as well. Then you're going to have information from packaging as well. So it's going to be multiple teams. Your suppliers, you're going to be reliant on them telling you the right information. Legal as well. I mean, there's going to be so many other teams and people involved in this. It's not just your product information. Of course, it's all about a particular product, but we are widening out the information that you need to gather. And of course, at the moment, that's probably in multiple silos, as we love to talk about silos and bringing information together. And of course, that means multiple different teams that need to be involved. And I think that's an area that sometimes people just think, oh, it's product data. That's the only people that need to care about it. Unfortunately, it's actually far wider than that, and it means that more people are going to need to be involved, more people are going to provide that information, and then it's also, you're more reliant on multiple different people to give you that information, particularly the supply chain, making sure that you are confident in the information that your suppliers have given you, that it is correct, and that it will stand up. And I think that is one of the biggest areas, maybe the biggest red flag within this, is how do you make sure that the information that you're getting is valid, correct, and legal?
Yeah, we have to step into who is responsible for the correctness of this data, because you as a retailer, you are at the end of the chain, but who really is responsible for the right information? And that's by regulation, it's the company who produces a product within Europe, or who imports a product into Europe. There lies a responsibility. And when you go, when you are a manufacturer, and you can start at the source with gathering this information, it's much more easy to get the right information, because you're starting from the source. But when you have a product as an import company and you have to go back to the source, that's a big challenge, because there's a wide network of companies before this product reaches the border of the European Union. So it's easier to start from the source and gather all this information and then going back in time. That's a challenge.
I mean, that is sort of what the digital product passport means, right? So I think we identified multiple layers, right? So from a people and governance layer, like it's inside the organization, it's outside the organization, different partners that you should interact with to get all the data in place. So there's also a data layer. What is the data that you need to have there? What is required? What is going to be required maybe in the future? Because that also changes and might not be actually fully clear yet what the specific requirements for each industry for the digital product passport are going to be. And then there's the sort of tooling landscape that also like interacts, where, as we already discussed, part of that information sits in your ERP as it is more transaction based. Some might be in your PLM, your product lifecycle management tooling, because that's where the product is born. So the best place to start with that data collection. It sits in your PIM. Maybe it comes together in your product information management system or your master data management system. And that ties all the different sources together, both inside the organization and outside the organization. And then also you need to have a repository where it sits after the product is launched on the market, because it needs to be outside of your organization, right? As discussed, it needs to be available for the next 30 years. So you need to have that sit somewhere outside the organization so that it sits there, not within your own PIM. So you would, like, the easiest answer would be, or from a PIM perspective, you would say, oh yeah, you just implement a PIM and you have everything. No, then it's just getting started. You have a repository for the internal part of that product data, maybe a place where all the data can be tied together from all the different input sources, both internally and externally. And from there, you then can publish it to the external repository. But you need that external repository as well. And you need, and I mean, sorry to get into this level of technology, but a resolver, right? So we already mentioned GS1, which is basically the host of the URL, if that makes sense. So lots of different layers, lots of different parties that come together. That doesn't help in the one of the commenters mentioned a fog that surrounds the digital product passport, and I think we're trying to clear up that fog a bit. Where do you guys see the most uncertainty in the market? Is that coming from the European Union and from a regulatory perspective? Is that because no one in the market is actually taking this forward and really driving a vision? Where does the fog originate, and how can we clear it up?
I think it's the fact that we've been talking about this for so long, and we have, I would say it's been nearly at least coming up for 5 years, and we're still, I'm not going to say any clearer, but it's like, I think it's working out, what do I need? What do I need to move forward, and where am I going to get that from, and how do I pull all of that information together? And I think the fog is, when is it coming? What does it mean? And if I don't do it, what will happen to me? And I think because we've been, originally it was going to be 2024, I think we still haven't even rolled out one single digital product passport initiative for a particular category. It's not there yet. So I think the fog is like, what do I do? Where do I get started? And what do I need? And is it really that important? Because is it actually going to happen? So I think for me, we've been talking about it as being the most important thing, and it just hasn't landed. So it's kind of gone backwards. And then I think that's where the fog is. It's like, as a retailer or as a manufacturer, do I need to care about it? So I think that's, for me, is the fog, without having any clear definition or understanding of what the next steps are, what the actual deliverables are, and what the timescale is. So I think it's just sort of been this cloud hanging over people, thinking, I know I've got to get to it, but not right now, because the button hasn't actually been pushed. I think that's my feeling around the fog. I don't know what you think, Chris.
Yeah, I think that's completely true. A simple thing is you have to register your product with the European Union, but there is no place where to do this. So it makes it kind of, actually, it's not just a fob, but it's kind of starting to be a joke or something, because the European Union is actually asking us to make this happen, but they also have to take their steps. But on the other hand, there are companies which are really into this matter already, and they take competitive advantage from this. So it's not just the regulation and the punishment for of the digital product passport, but you also can have an advantage when you already start with it and say, okay, we want to be sustainable. We want to be able to repair our products in the end, and that awareness with the public makes it interesting because it can have this advantage in the market.
And I think that's really true, actually, that some companies have lent into it and seen it as a way to really expose whether they are, their sustainability, their eco credentials, and to really lean into that because they can prove it. That's giving them that competitive advantage, whether it's the digital product passport itself or whether it's they know that they need to get ready for it. And I think we're definitely seeing certain brands and making sure that they are really talking about that and being able to back that up. And I think they're already expecting their supply chain to give them that information. They can tell you the journey that their products have been on, how much carbon it is and so on. So they're already ahead. And I think, as you say, that is giving them a competitive advantage. So even though maybe we haven't been told exactly when it is, I think some people have definitely lent into that already. And I think it's also the fact that you can use some of that data for things like, and I've seen already people using it for authenticity of their products, particularly for high value items, maybe more in the fashion world or in jewelry, to actually be able to say, here's a QR code to prove that this is a truly, for example, a lovely handbag or an expensive watch or whatever it is. So, and they're also saying, that we can fully back up our journey of saying that, it's ethically sourced and so on. So that is definitely, some people have gone right for it and really understood that they could use it to their advantage before it's fully baked, as it were.
I think that makes a ton of sense, right? Especially for high value items. And I think Chris already mentioned a car. You can even update that continuously during the product lifecycle with repairs or maintenance. And instead of having this physical booklet, which has all the repair intervals and the invoices from the previous whatever engine maintenance that was in there, you now have a QR code that you can scan and which should have all the different repairs. So the same maybe for expensive watches or indeed expensive handbags, where I think currently there's a whole industry that does the vetting of what is real or what is not real. And there's great stories about when they're not real. There's a whole industry in, like, if you look at Vinted and they have, I'm not sure what the exact name is, but they have a service to sort of prove the authenticity.
Authenticator service, yeah.
Exactly, and that could be solved with a QR code. And I think
maybe the first people that have really jumped into it is the second-hand market, or understanding the resale or pre-loved, or however you want to call it. Pre-loved, I like, because it means that that you know that you are getting what you and say that. And I mean, I've just personally just resold one of my bikes, and obviously someone could scan the QR code that was on the frame because maybe because it's a high value item, and could check the authenticity of what I was selling. So it's already out there, and that tracked all of the components and so on. So I think some industries have already understood the value of that, maybe not in the same exact digital product passport, but they can see that people would do that to say, yes, this is truly what you're saying that you're selling. So I think that use case is already there, but it's not quite the same, but it's the beginnings of it. So I think it also goes back to your question, do people scan a QR code? And they absolutely do. So yeah, and I think the one thing that you did say, which is really important, is around the actual information that's stored on your product. on the whole, only certain parts of that can be changed. And I think that's a really important thing for people to realize, is that you can't just keep iterating your digital product passport. Certain information is locked. Once you've generated that QR code, you can't update it. You can, of course, update things like manuals and anything around the spare parts, but the actual record of the production of that particular batch or that particular item is locked. It is that digital twin, and it can be versioned, but only certain bits of information. I think sometimes people think that they can just keep updating that. No, it's a line in the sand, and that is what you've sold to your end consumer. So that's why you need to have that place to store it, so that you can keep updating it, but only the parts that are allowed to be changed, because that's really important as well, because it's not something that, it is fluid, but not all of it is fluid. So I think it's really important that that is something that we state, is that you can't change every piece of the information against the digital product passport.
The whole goal, of course, is being able to recycle a product or
Yes.
repair a product. So you need to be consistent. You need to be able to go back to the original. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense when you change things over time.
I mean, it does make sense for certain categories. It makes a lot more sense for certain categories versus others, right? So the ability to scan a QR code and then immediately see what the exact model name of the battery is, or the heating element in your coffee or a coffee maker or whatever. So you can purchase that spare part instead of searching through, currently you would ask Claude or ChatGPT to come up with the right spare part. But
you need to feed those, and that's where the QR code can feed your AI bot to give you that information. I think that's another area that is going to really help, is for AI to be able to make it machine readable. I think that is what you're saying there, is actually saying that these digital product passports will be able to be fueling the chatbots to give you that information far more than perhaps they are right now. And I think that's another area, because for me, it's giving that sort of consistency and standardization of data that is machine readable. Sorry, I jumped over you there, but it is actually a really important point around the digital product passport as well, that perhaps is becoming more interesting and more prominent as we are seeing a swap of people getting that product information from AI. Anyway, I will just leave that there.
No, totally. And I think it's a much more reliable source than having that product data from Reddit, right? Which is currently the biggest source of product data for most people, or for most LLMs anyway. So instead of getting your spare part information from Reddit or from some other forum, you get it from the real source, which would be the digital product passport hosted on a platform. But what I was going towards is, like, currently it's a bit of a guess often, like, okay, I have this coffee maker. I was repairing my coffee maker a month ago, and I needed to have a switch. The on-off switch broke off. So I wanted to buy a new switch, but the product numbers have obviously changed in the past 15 years that product model has been sold. And there's an old switch and a new switch, and then you spend 2 hours digging through different sources to just figure out what the exact product lifecycle was of the whole design history of the product, which is interesting in its own right, but not really helping me get a €5 switch that I need to fix my coffee maker. It would have been better if I just could have scanned the QR code, followed the link, and buy it at a store. And then we tie together also the upsell capabilities, or the commercial abilities and opportunities for the digital product passport, as Chris already mentioned. If you make that much more easily available, it's also much more. It's also interesting from a commercial perspective. Now, what I maybe want to go back to. So, okay, the digital product passport. What does it mean? Okay, some people will scan QR codes, maybe more on coffee machines and electronics than on fashion. But even there, from an interest perspective, people might be willing to see the batch or the authenticity of a certain product. You need, I think we touched where you need to have that product data stored, and which different entities or layers are connected. It's the data, it's the tooling, it's the governance people, both within the organization and the different entities, partners, supply chain partners outside the organization that are involved. Within the technology stack is also an orchestration of tooling. It's not just the PIM, it's internal tools from your PLM and ERP and your product information management tool, your PIM, but also the resolver that sits outside of your organization and the actual repository or storage of the digital product passport that needs to be covered. And of course, the physical layer, like these are the four layers, the actual barcode, the actual QR code, or the actual RFID. We touched the data layer with the different attributes in the different industries, where different categories have different attribute sets, even though that is still a bit foggy, I think, from a regulatory perspective about what you need to store and what you need to have available there. But I think what we also have discussed is the opportunity if you take a more proactive approach, where if you start collecting that data right now, if you start publishing that data, you give the user downstream, whether that is the actual customer or a pre-loved customer, or someone doing the repairs or doing maintenance or doing the circularity step at the end of the product life cycle, you give them much more opportunity to do something with it. And that is in and of itself, I think, a value add. The question is whether you can capture that as a manufacturer. Maybe if we tie it to, hey, what does it mean? Like, did we forget anything? Any high impact items where we missed the sort of key elements or things you would like to add?
I think it's just really understanding the role of PIM or MDM within the whole process. It's not, and I think, coming from, obviously I work for a PIM vendor and so on, but it's making sure that you understand that PIM and also I would say MDM, because you need both. I think that is really important, that this is one example of where you need obviously the master data and then the PIM on top of that. But it's not going to be just that as a tooling. You're going to need more than that. And if somebody tells you that they can cover the entire DPP journey, I would say that you need to question that. I mean, there will need to be partnerships to make sure that you can actually deliver this. I mean, PIM itself, of course, great at managing product data, but it has been for commerce and it has been for marketing. This is stretching PIM to another level, because even though it can handle all of that, it won't necessarily have the framework in place, and because we don't always have the framework, but we know that you're going to need to be gathering information from other systems that perhaps traditionally you haven't integrated into PIM, because we're talking about ESG data and so on. But some of the things that it has in there are incredibly important for ensuring that you have the auditability, the versioning, the traceability of the data in that. But PIM is just part of the whole overall solution stack that you're going to need for digital product passport. And I think we've already sort of said that as part of it. But it's very important to think about that you are going to need master data, you are going to need data from your ERP, you are going to need data from your suppliers. And then I see PIM as being, as you said, the orchestrator of bringing all of that information together to then create that digital product passport and make it available to be registered on this mythical database or wherever it's going to go. We'll pretend it exists, and then being able to wherever update that as necessary. But it's not going to be the absolute answer for DPP. It will need, whoever you choose will need to have the partnerships or the connections to create the entire digital product passport journey. I think that is really important to be aware that it is more than just PIM. Even though PIM is going to be, for me, the center of it, you are going to need to be able to, first of all, ingest and then publish that information to create the digital product passport, because it is the information that you're going to need is coming from multiple sources, and perhaps ones that you've never thought about integrating into this part of the platform before. And it is also going to have a very different endpoint. So that, I think, is, for me, the most important thing is that I'm not going to say don't believe your PIM provider when they say they have a complete digital product passport solution. I would just question it. I would question it.
Maybe to add to this, that within every company, this will consist on different ways of working, because every company has a different architectural setup. So this information, it's not saying, oh, you should have this information from this place or this information from this place. Every company is different. So you have to look into the architecture of the company and look where all the data elements exist. And if they don't exist, how can we get this information? So it's, but on the other hand, you should do it step by step.
Yes.
First of all, look into what you already have, because a lot of companies do have the information, maybe not in the format it's going to be used in the digital product passport, but they do have the information. So maybe to gather this information and maybe transform this information in a way that it's usable for the digital product passport.
I mean, you're absolutely right there as well, as that you think, oh, I've got to do everything all at once. But I think it's thinking about which of your products are going to be affected first, because it may be that you are not selling or you are not producing any of the products that are in the first predicted wave. That doesn't mean don't forget about it, but just think, can I start an audit to think about where is that information that I potentially need stored within my organization right now? And do I need to start talking to my suppliers or talking to other parts of the organization to bring together what I believe I'm going to need? And then you can identify the gaps. And I think that is, for me, the one thing that, even if you don't think you're affected by it, is doing that due diligence to work out, if I had to produce a digital product passport tomorrow, do I have the information for it, and where is it within my organization? And I think, if nothing else, it's that realization that you may not have everything that you need, but how are you going to get it? So sorry, I interrupted you there, Stefan, but that was what I just wanted to add on.
No, I think you're right. Where if you want to start tomorrow, it's about collecting all that data, and there is no silver bullet. I think that is something people have realized as well. If you've listened to the podcast up until now, there's so many different partners and parties and data sources and stakeholders involved that you shouldn't trust any single solution to this multifaceted problem. It is an orchestration problem, like so many problems are. The easy problems have been solved. Now it's just the difficult problems. But I do see the role that a product information management tooling, a master data management tooling has to play in this. It is a central role. It is why we're discussing this from a PIM perspective, because it is such a product data problem, not just a batch or transaction level problem, which would sit more in the ERP or in the product lifecycle management tool. But it does play a role. I think one thing I want to discuss is, this is all fine if you have a large team that is responsible for supply chain and product design, and you have a PLM tool and you have a PIM tool. But what if you're a smaller retailer and you now suddenly need to come up with a digital product passport? Like, is this not just, in a sense, regulatory capture, where the big guys have found a way to keep out the smaller players in this market? How do you see that?
The important thing to know is that who is responsible for delivering this information. It's in fact not really, the retailer should be able to enter this in, to be able to get this information, but the one who's importing things is responsible. The one who is manufacturing a product is responsible. And if you are, as a retailer, have your own brand, for instance, then you are responsible to manage this. If you just a reseller, you're not the one who is responsible for this. So it depends on what role you have in as a retailer, for instance. So the smaller ones, mostly, they just buy and sell things, and they're not really don't need this department for a digital product passport. But the ones who's importing things, they do.
So I do feel, if I was out there and if I was thinking about it right now, would this be a great opportunity to provide a service for people? Maybe by using some kind of underlying PIM technology, or hosting something where you are helping people have their own way of building out the information that they need. Because, as you say, if it's mandatory and you are just a smaller, maybe even a I'm going to say an Etsy seller or whatever you're doing, you're maybe creating, I'm going to say hats for your cats or whatever it is, and you've only make 5 different things, you're still going to need to be able to talk about where that comes from. So I do think there is an opportunity for anybody that wants to go into that market to help people get ready for this, because it's almost going to be like, you outsource payroll, you could outsource your digital product passport. And I do feel that there are people talking about doing that, and there are companies out there that are going to offer this to people. So to your question, I think yes, of course, larger, manufacturers, brand manufacturers, larger retailers, they've got this covered if they get it right. But I agree with you. The smaller, more niche, or people that have only a smaller range of products, I think it's quite scary and worrying for people to continue there. And obviously, if they know that they've got to provide that information to their resellers or whatever it is, or if they have to list it on a marketplace, I don't know where that will sit. How are they going to make sure that they're compliant? I think there is going to need to be some kind of service where you upload your Excel spreadsheet or whatever it is, and it really helps you do that for you.
There are already some companies providing these services.
Exactly. So I think it's, depending on where you sit within that, you will be covered. I think my biggest worry, and I think this is what I mean, or worry, or what I think is going to change, is the complexity of variants, maybe, and offerings, I think is going to diminish in the short term. I think particularly if we hit the textiles, and if we look at fast fashion, I think that is where we're going to see, when this happens, we're going to see the biggest change, because that need to produce some new everything. And we know there are certain retailers out there, something new every 2 weeks or whatever it is. That is going to be a lot to manage, to be able to get all of that information and to make sure that you have everything that you need from a digital product passport point of view. So I do see there are going to be impacts perhaps in the range of products that we will have in the short term when this happens. So I think that's something to be aware of, is that perhaps it's going to change. Maybe the fact that we're used to having so much to choose from. I think this, in a way, and maybe that's the whole point, is to shorten and maybe make people a little bit more aware of how much they are buying that perhaps they don't need. And I feel that that's the whole concept around circularity. So it's a very interesting area. And I think the digital product passport is doing far more than just giving you that information. It's really making you question your actual as a consumer. That's just my take on it, and I don't know whether that's what's going to happen, but I do feel it's going to, maybe unfortunately some of the smaller brands won't be able to survive. I hope not, and that's why I'm hoping that any service will keep those people up and running. Sorry, that was a long answer to that
Maybe
question.
also something to add is that not all products are now obliged to deliver this information. No. Because there is a certain route where, driven by the European Commission, they start with batteries, iron and steel, then textile, which is already, early 2026, it says, but that's now.
We are early 2026 now. So,
And it's a mandatory 27, 28. And then you got aluminum, tires, furniture, electronics, mattresses, construction products. So there is a whole chain of products which needs to be in place at a certain point in time. And for this preparation, you need, when you will have to start from scratch, you need at least 2 years to prepare everything in the way that you can provide this information as a digital product passport. So for certain areas like textile, you really have to start now. Actually, you needed to have started last year or the year before, but if you don't have started yet, it's time to do so.
Right. I think that's a great way to to end the episode on. So you can start tomorrow, basically, because probably you're already too late with your product life cycles. It is not just regulatory compliance and a lot of administrative overhead. There are definitely opportunities. I think not just on the on the digital product passport side, but having that overview, having all that data in one place in a product information management tooling or a master data management tooling has benefits beyond the digital product passport as well. Like it is something that from a hygiene perspective is good to have. That never got anyone richer, but we touched on AI. Having a good product data foundation is a must-have for good AI queries and having your products discoverable on AI platforms. So be that through a published digital product passport, or be that through having your product data in order on your own platforms and publishing it from there. It is good to have that full coverage and a single repository and data foundation for your product data, regardless of whether you actually have to publish at all to a DPP. And I think it's also one of the best places to start. Like it's an internal project that you can run. You don't need to have all the interactions with your suppliers or your supply chain just yet. It's good to have the different stakeholders and different departments that are involved aligned on this, because it is coming. So I think if you have any questions, well, probably you will have questions left after this episode. Where can people find more information on the digital product passport? Helen, and then Chris?
I think where to start is obviously, even though it may be quite detailed, is to actually look at the regulations that are coming from the EU themselves. And then I would also suggest looking at maybe some of the other sort of, obviously Surpass is the place to be really looking for information. They're talking about it's a EU organisation that's helping implement it, and that will give you more information around it. It can be quite technical. I would say that you might want to look at other places if you're not really into the weeds, because trying to read some of those directives, it's quite a lot to take in. So I would say look at that and then research around, ways to actually solve that, and whether that's with a PIM. Obviously, I would say with a PIM, because I work for a PIM company, and obviously looking at syndication and so on, but look at what people can offer you to help you get started, and also be thinking about, as you said, can you look at your product information right now? But yeah, I mean, I think unfortunately, it's looking at the really, I'm going to say dry information around the actual digital product passport itself.
Yeah, and maybe also look into GS1, which is a big driver of this information, and they're not the owner, but they are working closely together with Surpass and with also with PIM solutions. So they also know quite a lot of information. And of course, on our platform, we also provide information. As time goes by, we also update information and try to keep up with the latest developments.
Right. Well, with that, I want to thank you both for sharing all your time and knowledge today. And I know there's so much more ground to cover. We didn't touch on the DPP and blockchain, which is an episode of itself. I think we hardly got into the AI discussion, which I think is another episode in and of itself. But I do think that it's important to note that this is also great input for the artificial intelligence developments that we are seeing. Please do subscribe to our podcast and keep an eye on our LinkedIn, because that's where we keep publishing new events and new webinars, including the live recordings of our podcast. And I hope to see you in the next episode. Helen, Chris, thanks a lot for joining us today, and speak to you guys soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks.